Welcome back to The Presumption. I'm Sara Azari, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Jim Griffin. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Sara.
And Matt Fondelier. And we're back with our very special guest, Savannah Chrisley. Hi, Savannah.
Thank you so much. Love talking to y'all, so this is good.
So we want to focus this conversation. I'm about the positive, the good vibes, the solution. Because God knows our jobs are like reality TV, but a dark one. And so what really sort of drew my interest to you was the work that you're doing, just being so vocal about the conditions in prison that your dad is facing, advocating for criminal justice. I also want to touch on some of the politics in your parents' case. One of the things that we really don't care about on this platform is politics. I can tell you, Jim and I think Matt too. We're not politically aligned with you, okay? But we don't care.
I'm an anarchist. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm a lone wolf.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and we really, Jim more so than me because of where he's located. But I've had a number of clients who, have told me, hey, I don't vote for the same guy you do, but I like your, advocacy, whatever. So it's not about politics. But there are some things that you feel very strongly about. And of course, this is election year. So I kind of want to take that conversation there a little bit as well. So your father is housed in the federal camp Pensacola. It's a minimum security camp for white collar offenders. And we say prison is not a park. So when people start complaining, to some extent, obviously we make sure our clients are okay, but we're like, it's not a park. I mean, you're in prison, and however, there's some really horrible things about where your dad is. And I absolutely believe his complaints because I filed 12 motions under the CARES Act during COVID, and I got 5 people out because of those conditions. And you and I were having this conversation over the weekend where, you're doing it's like similar to how I was doing it. They couldn't figure out how I was getting the information that I was getting, the inside information. And speaking of receipts and stats that you keep so well, you have some stuff that you're sitting on as well about that prison. So tell us about the conditions at Pensacola and what you're doing to expose those and what your father's done.
Yeah, so I've gone on Fox, News Nation. I've been very vocal about the conditions, and by no means do I think this should be a 4 seasons. You're in prison, but you should also have the basic necessities: clean drinking water, food, air conditioning, just the bare minimum. And they don't have that. It was 15 degrees this past week there, and they had no heat. These men were literally freezing, and they did nothing about it. The warden doesn't care. Also, you look at it, and I've become very vocal about it because at the end of the day, we are treating illegal immigrants that come into our country better than we're treating our own people that are in our prisons. It is what it is. It costs about $350 a day to house an illegal immigrant. It costs about $150 a day to house a federal inmate. So first off, we're already going wrong there. And two, there's black mold, asbestos, lead-based paint. They're consuming food, the chicken from back in 2019, but yet they're given funding every year to order food. So where's that funding going if you're feeding them food from 2019? And that's where I think it's going to hit Congress, is when you start pulling out, let's forget about the men. Let's forget about the men and women. Let's look at the dollars. And you look at the amount of waste that has occurred and where this money's going. Because I can tell you where some of it's going in Pensacola. It's going in the warden's pockets. They're stealing gym equipment. They're stealing food from the commissary. They're stealing Tide Pods to where the men don't get their laundry done for a week because the COs walk out with all the Tide Pods. It's things like this are occurring, and there's no one to hold them accountable.
So go ahead, Jim.
Yes, Savannah, I know that your dad's been vocal about the conditions there and has been trying to, publicize it. And and he wanted to have interviews with the media to shine the spotlight on it, and he was denied those requests, but ultimately he was able to give an interview with Brian Enton of News Nation, who's a friend of ours. How did Brian arrange that? Was that on?
It was through the lawyers. It was through legal call, and they submitted their request. They went through the proper channels in order to be able to sit down and do an interview with him. But of course, it was denied. They said that it would cause a serious risk to the facility to have Dad do an interview, and that it's complete.
And so he called his lawyer, and his lawyer put Brian on a 3-way and did an interview that way.
Brian went there.
No, Brian did not go there. The lawyer was asking questions and Brian was asking questions. I really don't know in its entirety how exactly it went down. I just know that there has been a lot of retaliation since then, but it's also something my dad's like, you know what, I'm willing to put up with if it means that it's going to cause lasting change. And because of that interview, you've had the deputy director of the BOP show up at the facility. You have had, they're doing extensive, walkthroughs and looking at everything. Dad was pulled aside by people. I mean, people are listening now. But the issue is the BOP gives these prisons a heads up of when they're coming. So you're giving them a heads up so that they can turn around and hide stuff. Just like when they found out the BOP was coming, they had all these men take all the expired food, put it in a tractor trailer truck, and then when the BOP left, they brought all the food back into the cafeteria.
Wow. So Jim's client, it's a high profile case, Alec Murdaugh. Yep. He didn't give an interview to media, but he was just having a call with Jim, like a regular attorney call, and he was reading some things to Jim, and they ended up on a documentary that no money was made from it, none of that. That's not an issue. And he got Jim, he lost his privileges for how long? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, he lost his phone privileges for at least a month, and they did some other things. I mean, they.
But also too, with that, there's also my dad's in a federal facility. That was a state facility, so that's South Carolina Correctional. This is Federal Bureau of Prisons, so it's two totally different avenues.
Sure. But it's the same. It's the same.
But the fact that, and it's a problem. And when we went through that with Alec's case, I mean, ACLU, they claimed they were going to come in and do something about it. They didn't, but
Well, that's my next route, because the thing is why are you scared of these men and women talking? Why don't you want them talking to the press? If you're doing everything you should be doing, then there should be no harm in them speaking to the press, especially if you're not getting any money from it, which my father did not. Per BOP policy, you are allowed to do interviews as long as there is no monetary gain from it.
Right.
Yeah. So Savannah,
the First Amendment protection, protected speech. Even if you argue that someone like your father doesn't have that constitutional right because he's in prison, which I don't agree with, the press does. I mean, we as a public need to know, what's going on. When you are,
what was your Jim? What was your question?
Yeah, I was going to point out, Savannah, when the Department of Corrections here was confronted about this policy, and why are you denying inmates the opportunity to talk to the press? I mean, their justification is, well, the victims of their crime should not have to hear their voices. Yet, that's every time my client talks to his son on the telephone, they're releasing that Freedom of Information Act, and it's being played, in every outlet imaginable. I mean, so it's
and don't you love that FOIA only works in certain instances? It never works for us, but it works for when they want to humiliate someone.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
When you do want to reach out to ACLU, one of my friends does a lot of the prison litigation.
I'm working with a lawyer now from Wilmer Hale.
Okay.
And just
this is an ACLU lawyer. He works he's the director of ACLU here, but he knows all the people, and that side of the world as well.
Yeah.
So you have also been advocating, aside from the interview that your dad gave, and recently you posted something on your Instagram, which was a very long letter, what appears to be from someone, I don't know who, to the director of BOP. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about that and how you came across that?
So I get letters all the time. And this was actually a letter that not only I was copied on, but you have key members of Congress, the director, deputy director. There was about 65 people copied on this email. And this is from someone at the facility. I still do not know who it is. There is some whistleblower there that all this information is coming from, such as environmental reports that showed the prison knew about black mold back in 2014. I feel like this is going to be another Camp Lejeune type lawsuit that's going to come their way because they've known about these conditions. These men are showing up to serve 3 years, but really they're getting a life sentence based off the conditions they're being forced to live in. And we don't know what the ramifications are for black mold, asbestos, lead-based paint. The drinking water is not safe for them to drink, but yet commissary is out of bottled water.
Right. Good grief.
Yeah.
Savannah, I have a question for you. Hearing earlier that you have like a real estate practice and obviously you've been on reality TV. How quickly did you have to become an expert in all these different matters of the law? Because over these last conversations that we've been having, it just feels like you have had to learn so much so quickly and a wide variety of stuff, like not just dealing with the court stuff, but you're dealing with the prison stuff. So, a shorter version of that is like, how long did this take you? And then how do you organize all this in your mind?
Yeah, I think when you have no other choice, you do it. This is life or death situation. Because I look at it when I'm in these visitation rooms, and especially where my father is, I see these men who are in their late 60s, 70s, and I'm like, that could be my dad. Like, my dad could potentially die in here. And I'm not going to allow that to happen. So I stay up at all hours of the night. If I get 3 or 4 hours of sleep, I'm happy because I'm going to research these things and I'm going to find the right people to help me. And you just educate yourself because I was tone deaf to our system. It didn't affect me. I didn't care about it. And that's my biggest message to people now is don't wait until you're affected to actually care about it and open your eyes to something bigger than yourself. And because of that, that's why I'm such an advocate for our prison system. And yes, I am a conservative, but amongst conservatives aren't for prison reform until the Trump administration when the First Step Act was enacted. And that was a bipartisan bill that was brought in 2018. And it's giving nonviolent offenders a second chance to re-enter back into society in a faster, safer manner. And because of that, I'm like, thank God. That's why my parents' sentences went down due to the First Step Act. And looking at these facilities too, you're talking about Donald Trump wanting to close down these prison camps. His viewpoint was if you can be at a facility like this and walk out the doors and no one's going to stop you, then you should be at home. You should be serving your time at home and you should be contributing back to society. And so for me, just like 125 federal facilities, it's a report I love to go to. It came out over the summer. It was there was an OIG report done. And it said all 125 federal facilities were in need of drastic repairs and upwards of $2 billion. $2 billion worth of repairs that needed to be done to these facilities. Congress gave them $60 million for these repairs. So you got $2 billion, but only $60 million are given. And so you look at it and you're like, all right, where are we going wrong? What can we do to help these men and women enter back into society? And that's where I am going to hopefully be able to reach some of my conservative friends and just neighbors is, hey, you know what? There's a book that I'm reading and it's talking about reforming criminal justice from a Christian perspective. And it's by a guy, Matt Martins. He's a lawyer at WilmerHale, but he also went to seminary. And
Savannah, Matt's a really good friend of mine. We did a case recently, and
so I love him.
Super guy.
Yeah. And so his book, it really was a slap in the face to me because it made me realize, like, whoa, that I had never thought of it this way. Because when you talk about being pro-life, for all my conservative friends, pro-life doesn't just stop with a child. It doesn't just stop with a fetus or an unborn baby. It goes to the full extent of someone's life from 0 to 100. And that's where I hope within our prison system, people will realize, like, hey, you don't get to choose when you're pro-life and when you're not, because that's hypocritical. And that's where I'm at right now is you don't have to. And two, if you don't care about these men and women, that's on you. Let's come from a very selfish standpoint of where your taxpayer dollars are going. Your taxpayer dollars are going to a place that really they don't need to go. There was just a report, I want to say, by Cory Booker that was just put out that stated over $140 million of taxpayer dollars have gone to waste because the BOP doesn't know how to calculate FSA credits for the First Step Act. So they are falsely imprisoning these men and women 6 months to a year longer than they ever should have been in there because they don't know how to implement all these different things. So that's $140 million. And so for people, you should probably pay attention to where your money's going. And do you really want your money going to a system that's just abusing people? Because there's a reason why we have the highest recidivism rate of all our NATO countries. We're doing something wrong. And what is that we're doing wrong?
Let me ask you something. Speaking of being conservative, I mean, number one, I appreciate your pro-life view, but that is not a prevalent view among your conservative brothers and sisters. There's a lot of hypocrisy about we're pro-life for the fetus, but we're not pro-life about people that are on death row. You know, put them on death row. So I very much appreciate that. But in terms of
and two, I think a big thing for people to take into consideration is, especially with me after dealing with this, I know without a shadow of a doubt, my parents are innocent. There are people on death row who are innocent. 1 in 20 criminal cases result in a wrongful conviction. If we can't even get that right, we're sending someone to death, and then it comes out 20, 30, 40 years later that they didn't commit this crime. What if you would have killed this man? What if you would have put him to death? That's where I have an issue with it. And at the end of the day, if you're so conservative and Christian and all these things, that's God's decision to make. That's not my decision to put you to death. God will do his work.
Right. I agree. And politics obviously was a big part of this case. You mentioned about the prosecutor's pitch to the jury that you're the Trump of the South, that the judge was a Democrat. And on that point, I think you also mentioned, you should mention this, that she excused the one juror that seemed to have been pro-defense.
Yes, so this was a 4-week trial. She had read the jurors their rights to go back into the deliberation room, and then she had one juror stay behind, sent all the other ones out, and she called the juror up to the bench, and she said, I've noticed you've had a hard time staying awake during this trial. And the juror said, no, ma'am, the screens are down on the floor to view the evidence. And she said, I was processing things. And she said, I wasn't sleeping. And the judge said, well, to my knowledge, you've had a hard time staying awake. I'm going to relieve you of your duties. You can go home. We obviously objected to that because during trial, when the government had their witnesses on the stand, their key witness, this juror was audibly just slapping her notebook, shaking her head like this is ridiculous. That was the body language she was giving. And she was just audibly in our favor, and that's who the judge sent home.
Wow.
So with back to the politics and
to our judge. So prosecutors label us Trumps of the South. Right. Our judge was also the judge that ruled against Trump when it came to mail-in ballots. So obviously I have my theories of certain things and the way things went down, but also too, at the end of the day, you should never use someone's political beliefs in order to get the outcome that you want to get. Everyone's political beliefs are what they are, and it's because of their own life experiences. And
Right.
so the name Donald J. Trump should have never been used to incite anger amongst the jurors. Should have never been used.
But I mean, you're obviously very openly supporting Donald Trump. You're going to vote for him. You just recently met him in Georgia. You're speaking at CPAC, which is one of the most conservative organizations around. And you know, I wrote a book and it came out right before the pandemic about the Trump campaign crimes. I mean, as a lawyer, I take the position that there were crimes committed, and one of the chapters is pardon me, pardon who. And so I want to be the fly on the wall when you met Donald Trump recently in Georgia. And I'm wondering if you had any conversations about, you know, your belief in your parents' innocence and whether he would support you the way you're supporting him.
You know, he knows Fulton County. He right now is fighting Fulton County and the state of Georgia. You see what's going on with Fannie Willis. You see all the corrupt things that have occurred there. And when I was with him, he was aware of our case. He knew of it. And he's obviously, Trump issued the most pardons of any other president. And as we were just, I am too. You look at, for prime example, Congressman Chris Collins. He and I, we've had hour-long conversations. He served time at Pensacola. He is now getting ready to run again. He was pardoned by Trump, and it just goes to show that Chris Collins never turned his back on President Trump. When the whole video came out about, you know, grabbing all that, Chris Collins was the one who stood behind Trump and was like, you know what? It was locker room talk. And so when a lot of people turned their backs on him, Chris Collins did not. And because of that, I truly do believe that Donald Trump, who if you're loyal to him, he's loyal to you, is what I believe. I haven't been given any promises. None of that. But also I'm standing firm in my conviction that these are the things that I believe in. And because of the First Step Act and Jared Kushner behind that act, I mean, I see the impact that it's having on my parents. And you go to our prison system, you guarantee you will have 60 to 70% of the men there that love Donald Trump. And the reason for that is because he's giving them a faster way to enter back into society.
Why do I have a feeling, Jim, that she's going to end up like, we're going to see her on TV on some show on part of the Trump administrations. She's going to be the ambassador of criminal justice for the Trump administration. No, would you take that job if he offered it to you?
Without a doubt, 100%. Because at the end of the day, I don't believe I would take it if a Democrat offered it to me. It's not about, to me, criminal justice is not a left or right issue. It's a humanity issue. And if we had more people that would view it that way, and we had politicians who were open to differences of opinions and beliefs and figuring out, how do we come together? How do we do what's best for people? Then I think we would be so much more successful. But there's too much ego in the room for that to occur, at least as of now.
Well, without a doubt, it took a Republican president to get the First Steps Act passed, and I give Donald Trump credit where credit is due. I mean, if a Democratic president tried to get that legislation passed, he could never have gotten it. He could never have gotten it by the Republicans. But you know, I'm telling you, and it's a great piece of legislation, and we need more of it like that. And your question about Savannah, I think Savannah can do whatever the hell she wants to do. I've been very impressed with you today, Savannah. It's been really enlightening.
Because it was like we're talking to a reality TV star.
You know, I did go on YouTube and I saw you talking about some boyfriend. I was like, what in the world are we doing today? I got to tell you, I'm telling the truth. I was just like, what the heck?
But that's what I think.
He started sending me these one-sentence emails, right? And I'm like, okay, you don't understand.
But see, and that's also a thing that I think we need is so many everyday people need someone like that. They don't need politicians speaking at them and just telling them how things should be. They need people who have gone through it and who have seen it firsthand and who were tone deaf to it beforehand. And that's where I think now I can be very, very beneficial. And with my social media presence, it's obviously working because you had the deputy director of the BOP viewing my LinkedIn page. Now, why are you viewing my LinkedIn page? And it's
By
because
the way,
you're
girl,
concerned.
I know you're paying the premium like
Oh,
me.
I
It's
am.
expensive. Okay, it's like $500 a year because you get to see
I'm
who's looking at you.
Yes, I'm investigator. Even down to Pensacola has received millions of taxpayer dollars to repair their roofs after the hurricane years and years ago. Those roofs still have not been repaired. But when Pensacola realized that the BOP was going to be coming, they had roofers to come out there to do temporary repairs. I picked up the phone. I called the roofing company. I recorded the phone conversation because Tennessee is a one-party state. And I started asking the questions. What were you hired to do? Were you aware that there's black mold? Were you aware that the repairs that you're making are just encapsulating more moisture and causing more black mold? And you have the lady on the phone stating, ma'am, we were hired from the government just to do temporary repairs. So the government's not wanting to fix it. They're wanting to put a little Band-Aid over it. And it's causing these men, yes, it's causing health issues. And that is an issue. The fact that you have men that are being given the wrong medication and who are passing out, bleeding out, going to the hospital. I mean, there are so many, and even with the CARES Act was huge, but all the misconduct that has gone on with the CARES Act is baffling. And you have a counselor that is at my father's facility that states in internal emails, when they are subpoenaed, they will see the email to where she states that she will no longer submit any more black men for the CARES Act because they have a propensity for violence. And so my thing is there's all this misconduct going on, and they're so concerned. I'm sitting on audio recordings.
Oh yeah, tell us about that.
They're so concerned about how I'm getting information. It's their own people giving me the information. It's their own people who are tired. It's not just my parents that are suffering. It's also correctional officers, higher ups, because they're preparing themselves if they have to sue the BOP. And so I'm getting all this information, and I've released a recording of where correctional officers confiscated a cell phone from a guy. They don't have enough intellect to make sure the phone's turned off before they start talking about their illegal activity. But the correctional officers talk about taking these phones and reselling them. And they said, I thought the last time was the last time we were going to do this. And the CO goes, well, let's just do it one more time. So they're confiscating so-called contraband to then turn around and resell them to inmates to pad their own pockets. And so my thing is why aren't they wearing body cams? Why aren't they wearing body cams?
But Savannah, wasn't there also another recording you have in your stash that about sexual misconduct by one of the officers? Yeah, what is that?
So I am sitting on two different recordings, one from my mother's facility and one from my father's facility. One of them states how women are in prison for so long, so of course they want sex, and of course they can get it. These are COs saying these things. But then you also have this other CO at my dad's facility talking about how he watched women get raped in another facility. So I'm sitting on all of these things, and it's going to take, and two, you have them using the N-word, talking about running these in people over. It brings chills to my body. And I guarantee you, Cory Booker is not going to see too kindly upon all these audio recordings when he sits and hears them. And I did sit down with the governor of New Jersey 3 months ago on my podcast.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So listen, I hope this is a platform for justice. I hope you come back and join us and tell us about all the wonderful work that you're doing. Savannah Faith Chrisley, a woman of strength, a woman of faith. I admire you so much. You completely changed my mind about the whole reality TV rich brat girl thing.
Hopefully Jim's too.
You're very impressive. Probably won't be listening to you talking about your boyfriend much, but I really like what you're doing now. I really do.
Thank you.
And we will be in touch. And we invite everybody to follow you and follow the podcast Unlocked on all the podcast platforms where you listen to your podcast, and on YouTube, right? YouTube.
Yes, YouTube as well.
Yeah.
And also, while you're on YouTube, check out our pod. This is the first time listening. We got tons of episodes. We're called The Presumption. We're at The Presumption on all the social media platforms. And again, Savannah, excellent job today. Thank you so much for coming on to our show.
Thank you.
All right, Sara, Jim.
Thank you, everyone. And until next week, Jim, we rest.
We rest.